Seo was shocked to hear that now that he had become so weak, John wanted to cut off one of his limbs every week to feed the fox. That was certainly not pleasant. Staring at John, Seo picked up a rock from the ground. He stared at the rock and thought that, with all the violence he had learned from being beaten for 50 years, he could easily kill a modern man like John Hune with just one arm. He glanced at John again, who was still trying to persuade the others to make Seo surrender his other arm too. Furiously, Seo wondered to himself whether he should kill John, but he chose not to act impulsively. Instead, he tossed the rock aside and walked back to the cave. He realized that fear had clearly frozen their minds, and if he behaved too harshly now, it could create problems in his relationship with Director Kim. Suddenly, Chief O yelled at John to keep quiet if he didn't want his ankles broken again. Hearing that, Seo chuckled. He had been right to believe they were good people. It was simply a confusing situation for everyone. The following morning, as the sun rose, everyone assembled in front of the cave. This time, a two-headed snake appeared before them. But unlike the fox that had devoured Seo's arm, the two-headed snake merely asked for a small amount of blood. It was the exact same snake that had drained Chief O's blood, the one who had lost his limbs in his previous life. Hearing that it was only a small amount, a nervous Chief O stepped forward and offered his arm this time. But after drinking Chief O's blood, the snake gagged and vomited, saying, "This is disgusting. This is the worst human blood I've ever tasted." Hearing that, Chief became furious, but Seo understood it was the blood of a 21st century worker, soaked in nicotine and cholesterol. No wonder it tasted awful. Seo then turned around and asked John Mong-hoon to join him in gathering some herbs. Hearing that, John was stunned and asked Seo if he had really used his full name, but Seo didn't respond. Instead, he asked John if he was hungry. John replied that he was. Seo walked up to John and said, "I'll teach you about the fruits and edible herbs, so come with me." Seo leaned in and whispered to John that he intended to offer his arm to the fox again next week. And if he didn't survive, someone had to know how to live in this forest. Hearing that, John became extremely frightened, realizing that Seo had overheard everything the previous night. He had no option but to thank Seo and agreed to go along with him. Hearing his gratitude, Seo quietly laughed to himself because only he knew the fox wasn't returning, and Jian would never get the chance to use this knowledge. As the two of them reached a place filled with fruit trees, Seo shouted, "Jong Hun, how many times do I have to tell you that's the wrong fruit concentrate?" Seo apologized while picking a red fruit. Watching this, Seo warned him that eating that fruit could get him killed. This went on for hours as Seo kept giving instructions to John, and Jian had no choice but to follow them. Eventually, Jian began to feel drained and asked Seo to wait a moment, saying he needed a break. He had been digging endlessly to collect these herbs. Seeing his condition, Seo quietly laughed to himself because this was exactly how Jian had punished him when he first joined the company. Seo told Jian they had to finish before nightfall, so they needed to move quickly. Time passed gradually, and both kept working on their tasks. Then suddenly, John unearthed a huge ginseng. John was stunned to see it. Holding it in his hand, he said, "This thing is massive." He asked Seo if it was real ginseng. Seo replied that it was something like that. Seo knew that while it looked like ginseng, to be accurate, it was actually a yellow bamboo root. It could be due to the ascension path being so filled with energy, but here, yellow bamboo roots, usually no bigger than a pinky finger, had grown to this enormous size. Seo knew it wouldn't be very useful for cultivators, but it was an incredibly valuable medicine for martial artists known to boost ki, and it would likely benefit Director Kim. While they were talking, they discovered two more right nearby. Amazed, John asked Seo if it was alright to dig up so much wild ginseng. Seo naturally said yes and told him to take off his shirt and use it to carry them. Seo then glanced at the setting sun and noticed a crack in space. Seeing it, he realized that the cultivators would be arriving soon. He said to John, "Let's head back." As they made their way to the cave, the crack Seo had noticed earlier suddenly erupted with a massive blast, releasing an enormous surge of spiritual energy into the sky. At the moment of the explosion, Jian collapsed to the ground, screaming and holding his head. He wasn't the only one. Chief O was in the same state, along with Manager Kong. All three clutched their heads, crying out in agony. Seeing this, Director Kim started to panic, asking what was happening to them. Just then, 3 cultivators appeared, soaring through the sky. Looking at John, Chief O, and Manager Kong, a cultivator named Buko, dressed in golden robes, said, "What a surprise, who would have thought we'd find such raw talent here?" A black-cloaked cultivator named Huwok told Buko to back off, claiming they were his. Hearing this, the 3rd cultivator, dressed in blue, called Huwok shameless. Watching these cultivators, Director Kim became frightened and asked who they were. The cultivators noticed there were 7 individuals, but only 3 of them had spiritual roots. The others were simply ordinary mortals. Then Buko lifted his hand and formed a ball of lightning. He hurled it at John, who screamed in agony as thousands of lightning bolts surged through his body. When Buko finally stopped, he was astonished by how remarkable John's body was. It was the body of heavenly golden thunder. Then Huwok stepped forward, telling Buko to step aside as it was his turn. He was holding a musical instrument, and as he began to play, Manager Kong, who had her ears covered, suddenly started screaming in pain. But it wasn't an ordinary scream. It was so loud that it echoed throughout the entire forest. Seeing this, Huwok became overly excited, realizing that Manager Kong possessed the ghostly and transforming immortal root. He had never imagined that something like this truly existed. Then it became the 3rd cultivator's turn. He landed on the ground and, placing a hand on Chief's shoulder, infused him with spiritual energy. He examined Chief's body and discovered that it was a unique holy body. Chief was completely stunned and asked the cultivator what was happening. The cultivator smiled and announced that he would take all 3 of them as disciples of the Azure Heaven Creation sect, since each of them had the potential to change the entire world. In a deep voice, he asked Chief, "How does that sound?" Chief O was terrified in the cultivator's presence. He could barely breathe. He was overwhelmed, wondering what this power was, and felt like refusing might cost him his life. Suddenly, Huwok descended and urged Chief O to join the Black Ghost Valley instead, saying they possessed every cultivation method: immortality, the power to defy the heavens, fame, and fortune. He vowed that they would receive all of it within 100 years. Moments later, Buko also came down and questioned Huwok, asking what he was talking about, claiming that the Golden Divine Heavenly Thunder sect was the one most suited for them. While they were arguing, Director Kim stepped in and asked the cultivators if they could help them escape the forest, as at this rate they would all end up dying there. But the cultivators paid him no attention. Buko pulled out a bottle, opened its cap and said, "Mortals worry too much. How did you make it to the ascension path with such a useless body?" Saying this, he aimed the mouth of the bottle at John, and it instantly pulled John inside. John could do nothing but scream for help. Then the blue-robed cultivator took Chief O and glanced at Seo. He smiled and said, "Looks like one of them lost an arm to that fox." Noticing the wound, he decided to help personally. He channeled his spiritual power to heal Seo's hand, telling him that although he was just a mortal, he had courage. Seo's entire hand regenerated, and he expressed his thanks to the cultivator. He also took Manager Kong along with him. Then all 3 cultivators soared back into the sky, and before leaving, they told Seo that they had captured all the beasts and monsters along the ascension path on their way here, so the area would remain safe for the next 10 years. Watching them leave, Director Kim ran after them, asking them to wait and to tell them which direction to go, since they had no idea how to get out. He shouted for Section Chief John, Chief O, and Deputy Manager Kong, but it was pointless. The cultivators ascended into the sky and vanished. Watching them disappear, Seo felt deeply disappointed, but it was pointless. The same thing had happened 50 years ago. No matter how loudly they shouted, those cultivators treated them like insects and simply moved on. Still, Seo felt a small sense of relief, knowing they had at least healed his arm. While running after them, Director Kim became out of breath and collapsed to the ground, asking, "What do you expect us to do in a forest like this?" But just before he completely gave up hope, Director Kim suddenly noticed several beams of light soaring in the same direction the cultivators had gone. Seeing that, he grew confused and asked, "What are all those lights in the sky? Is something over in that direction?" But Director Kim couldn't abandon his team, so he turned back. The following day, heavy rain poured down with lightning flashing all around. All 4, Deputy Manager O, Manager Kim, Manager CIO, and Director Kim were taking shelter in the same cave. But Deputy Manager O's condition was worsening. She lay on the ground, coughing up blood. Manager Kim asked CIO if there was any kind of herb they could use, as Deputy Manager O's condition was critical. She was panicking, unsure of what to do. Aware of what the future held, CIO told Manager Kim, "Let's wait a bit longer. Someone might show up and heal her." Hearing that, Manager Kim looked confused. Suddenly, they heard the sound of footsteps. Someone stepped into the cave and said, "Mortals on the ascension path are like ants, struggling in the battles between dragons." Seeing the man, Director Kim quickly stepped forward and asked, "Who are you?" The man smiled and replied, "I am the Sea Dragon King." What happens next? Stay tuned, the next part is coming soon.